By early December 1939, Finland was not losing the war in theory. It was losing it on maps. Red arrows pushed steadily west. Distances shrank. Time ran out. One Soviet breakthrough in eastern Karelia would not just take territory, it would open the rear of Finland's main defensive line. And once that happened, the war would end quickly. This is a story of the moment Finland decided to stop retreating. By the first week of December, Soviet formations were advancing rapidly through eastern Karelia, overwhelming thin Finnish screening forces and widening dangerous gaps in the line. One of those advances moved through Tolvajärvi. If the Soviet column continued west from here, it would gain access to road networks leading behind Finland's primary defenses. Routes meant for supply, not combat. The danger was not political. It was operational. A collapse here would force Finland to abandon prepared positions elsewhere, unraveling the entire front. Marshal Carl Gustav Emil Mannerheim understood the implications immediately. This was not a sector that could be managed passively. Command in the region was reorganized, and overall responsibility was handed to Colonel Paavo Talvela, an officer known less for caution and more for decisive action under pressure. Talvela did not inherit a strong position. He inherited a problem. The region around Tolvajärvi was deceptively quiet. On maps, it looked manageable. On the ground, it was a trap. Frozen lakes cut the landscape into compartments. Dense forests restricted movement and visibility. Narrow causeways and choke points forced units into predictable paths. The ice could support men, even vehicles, but it offered no cover. Anyone exposed on it could be seen. And once seen, targeted. In this environment, cohesion mattered more than numbers. Any force that lost coordination here would dissolve into confusion. Talvela had no intention of retreating further. When Finnish units reached Tolvajärvi, order was already slipping. Exhausted soldiers drifted west in small groups. Some had lost contact with their officers. Others no longer knew where their units were. Cold, hunger, and constant pressure had begun to replace command with instinct. Talvela responded by placing Lieutenant Colonel Aaro Pajari in direct control of the forward sector. Pajari arrived to find a line that existed mostly on paper. He stopped the retreat. Men were halted, questioned, reorganized. Stragglers were reassigned on the spot. Ad hoc units were formed from whatever was available. Defensive positions were rebuilt in frozen ground using axes, shovels, and bare hands. The line was thin, but it existed across the lake system. Soviet infantry had already seized key terrain and begun digging in. They expected time. Talvela refused to give it to them. Before dawn on December 9th, Finnish ski troops began moving to the forest toward the narrow crossing at Kivisalmi. The movement was deliberate and quiet. Skis slid over hard snow. Branches snapped softly in the dark. Men advanced by instinct, following silhouettes and whispered signals. Ahead, light flickered through the trees, along the forest edge near the crossing. Soviet soldiers had built fires. They were eating, resting, warming themselves after long marches through the cold. From their perspective, the Finns were still withdrawing. There was no reason to expect an attack. They were wrong. From close range, Finnish rifles and submachine guns erupted in coordinated fire. The opening volleys shattered the camp. Men fell before they could react. Others ran blindly into darkness and ice. The attack lasted only minutes. By the time Soviet reinforcements began moving toward the sound of gunfire, the Finnish attackers had already vanished into the forest, leaving behind confusion, casualties, and no clear sense of where the threat had come from or where it had gone. The following days were quieter, but more dangerous. Patrols moved cautiously through the forest. Listening posts strained for sound across frozen lakes. Both sides knew the calm would not last. Positions were reinforced. Plans were refined. Then, in the early hours of December 11th, rifle fire broke out behind Finnish lines. A Soviet detachment had worked its way around the northern flank, bypassing the front entirely. They struck supply columns and rear area units, medics, drivers, and field kitchens, places never meant to see combat. The move was bold and desperate. The attackers had marched hard through forest and snow. They were exhausted, cold, hungry, When they reached the Finnish supply area, they found field kitchens still active, food still hot, pots still steaming. They stopped. It was a human decision. In war, human decisions are often punished. Pajari reacted immediately. Every available man was gathered. There was no time for planning, only movement. The counterattack struck before the Soviet unit could reorganize. Fighting continued through the night, close, confused, and relentless. By first light, the road was reopened and the infiltrators driven off. The rear was secure again. The incident delayed Finnish preparations but did not change Talvela's intent. Ahead, the Soviet division was spread across frozen lakes and narrow roads. Its formations were rigid, its confidence shaken. Talvela now prepared to strike, not to hold ground, but to destroy the enemy's cohesion entirely. Tolvajärvi would become the place where Finland stopped retreating. The Soviet force was larger, better equipped, confident in its momentum. Talvela intended to break it anyway. In the next episode, the counteroffensive begins.